Hi, I'm Fred Schultz. I'm running for president. First of all, this evil, disgusting person, Trump, he did not, first of all, don't kid yourself. Whenever he says, oh, this is an attempted coup, this impeachment is an attempted coup. No, the attempted coup, the actually realized coup, was Trump using the Electoral College to seize power, despite the fact that it steals our rights to one person, one vote. I fought the last 3 years. I fought hard to get to the Supreme Court and to have them hear my case. They threw out my case. That means at least 5 people decided against hearing my case, and Roberts had to withdraw because I was suing him for swearing in Trump, despite the fact that Trump had lost by 3 million votes. So that means that one of, or more, or all of the people on the, quote, left voted against our rights, our human rights, and our constitutional rights to democracy, just as the full Ninth Circuit. At first I was heard by 3 judges, then by the full court. They made a point of informing me that they had decided against my case unanimously. They had unanimously decided we do not have a right to an equal vote, as they read the Constitution. Well, as I read the Constitution, we do have a right to an equal vote. The 14th Amendment says we have a right to equal protection of the laws. If that doesn't mean we have a right to an equal vote, I don't know what does. Yes, it was only interpreted to mean one person, one vote in the 1960s instead of in the 1860s, but the Supreme Court still in the 1960s said we have a right to one person, one vote. Meaning Trump is an illegitimate president. Now, even if you believe that he, quote, won the Electoral College, as President Jimmy Carter said, he did not win the Electoral College because Carter believes, and Carter has seen evidence, which obviously we haven't seen as much as he has, but he said he's seen evidence that shows that the Russians not only hacked into Hillary's emails, but hacked into the voting bases, the voting databases of every state voting registrar. And, I mean, Mueller had said that they hacked into everyone, but he said he couldn't determine what they had done after hacking into the voting databases. Really, well, what do you think they did? You think they were there for their health? No. No. They were there changing votes. Changing votes. Let me repeat. Either taking people off of the voting rolls or changing votes. Meaning he didn't even win the Electoral College. Meaning Trump is not the president. Now the Democrats, good, they're impeaching him for, saying to for asking Ukraine to investigate his rival, his main quote rival Biden. Good. They should be investigating. They should be impeaching him for that. But they also should have impeached Pence, because there's enough evidence that Pence was ensnared in his little scheme. Not to mention Trump asking China to hack into, to help him beat his opponents, meaning me. Meaning now I have to worry that Trump is not only going to try to hack into that China is not only going to try to hack into my emails, or Trump will try to command the federal government to do so, but that, they might send honeypots out to get me, as they call them in those James Bond movies. Honeypots. Beautiful women from other countries to pretend that they love me when they're really the spy who loved me, or pretend to love me. All right, I'm not up in the polls enough for that to happen yet, but you watch. I'm not kidding. You watch. I mean, I shouldn't have to deal with this. My life. Anyway, let's go on. Look, as far as why I'm better than the other candidates, and I'll record a video about that. I mean, well, Trump, of course, I'm not a rapist. I'm not in Putin's pocket. I'm not corrupt, for starters. I believe in, democracy, human rights, the rule of law. That said, all the other candidates believe that they have the right to lock you up if you're not hurting someone. They are wrong. No one, no government, nobody that calls themselves a government, nobody that calls themselves a neighbor, nobody has the right to, if this were under normal law, it would be called kidnapping and torture and slavery. Well, we did away with slavery in the Constitution. But now you're saying, but if you do something to your body that your neighbors don't approve of, like taking some plant and shoving it in some hole that they don't like, or having sex with someone, but you pay them for short-term sex instead of long-term sex, a.k.a. marriage. Or that it's okay if you do gambling if you are the state, if you're a state lottery, but not if you're some, poor black person running a numbers game, as they used to call it. The numbers game. Yeah, when the Fed started up their, lottery, they put out a lot of small black businesses out of business. Out of business. So where do we stand now? Look. As I said, I'm the only candidate, the only anti-slavery candidate. The U.S. has 2.2 to 2.4 million people in jail right now. We can't even get proper numbers. We arrest approximately 11 million people in the last year, down from 14 million a few years ago, probably due to several states legalizing marijuana. Against federal law. And don't kid yourself. Trump could at any second decide to change his mind, put in some federal prosecutor who's against legalizing drugs, just like he did with Jeff Sessions, if you don't recall. Excuse me, I do. Now, as far as Trump saying he believes in criminal justice reform, you know how many people he has freed under his first step, they call it? About 1,000. About 1,000. Maybe it's up to 2,000 by now. Again, you know how many people are in our federal and state jails? About 2.2 million. But you know how many of them are in federal jails? About 190,000. So that, according to our law, is the most that I could pardon as a president, is 190,000. Even if I believe that the states are violating prisoners' civil rights and human rights by jailing them, I believe that we can't even approach jail by jail and free them with federal troops, although I'm going to look into that. For now, it appears the only way we can free these people is to get elected in every state. Now, if you're wondering, are you continuing your fight, Fred? Are you continuing this battle? How can you? You're not in the polls. You're not in the debates. Look, to make it to this next debate, all we need is to reach a certain number in the polls. I think it's 4 or 5%. 4 or 5%. And we have to get 200,000 approximately people to donate $1. To my through Act Blue. There's a link at my website, www.fredforpresident2020.com. Fred for President, spelled out in letters, 2020.com. www, of course. Anyway, you go there, you donate $1, then we hit 4 or 5% in the polls. We're in the next debate. And we can and will crush them. By the way, I just read a poll, first poll ever released on this subject by the Cato Institute. A poll was taken in March, but the numbers weren't released until a few weeks ago, saying that 55% versus to 45%, the American population believes that drug offenses, nonviolent drug offenses, should be treated as more like a traffic violation than like any kind of other criminal law. Meaning you get a traffic ticket. Well, they didn't ask people how they would how they feel about just legalizing drugs, as I believe the Constitution necessitates. And I will swear an oath to uphold the Constitution, and I do believe the Constitution requires me to not arrest anyone who hasn't hurt someone else. Now, by the way, not one of our judges in power has obeyed the Constitution as it was understood for the first 150 years of our nation, and not one of them has allowed a defense attorney to inform the jury, much less if they inform the jury themselves as they used to until about 100 years ago. Not one of the 150 years ago, not one of them has informed the jury of their right, of their responsibility to vote not guilty if they believe, it's not only their job to evaluate the facts and to apply them to the law as the judge tells them he or she reads the law. No. Hell no. Hell no. There's another part of the law called jury nullification. It's called jury rights. It's part of a defendant's, in a criminal cases or in civil cases even, right to be judged by a jury of their peers. That means, and you are never told this, if a defense attorney tries to tell the jury this, the attorney is put in jail for contempt of court by the judge. Not one judge has ever allowed a jury to be told of their rights to, quote, nullify, to vote not guilty for any reason if they believe the law in question is not moral, if they believe the law in question is not moral as applied in this case, if they believe that the verdict in this case would not be fair, that conviction would... A jury isn't even allowed to be told of how many months or years the defendant is looking at in jail for the offense in question. Well, I can tell you this. Some of these other people, all of them, a lot of them, excuse me, sorry about the burp. I ate some food that disagrees with my stomach. They all say they're against this drug war. Yeah, well, every one of them has made a living from except for Yang, but we'll get to him in a minute, by being employed by the federal government or state government to enforce these laws. Every one of them has enforced the victimless crimes laws. Now, let's get down to it. Bernie says he wants to legalize marijuana. 4 years ago, he said he would follow the lead of the states and see how it went. Now he's decided he wants to legalize marijuana. Look, first of all, as I said, 190,000 people are in federal jail, about half of them for drug crimes, and about 99% of them in federal jail, even those in 99.5% of those in for drug crimes are in not for drug possession, but for drug dealing. So in other words, when Andrew Yang, when he went on Joe Rogan's show, he said, I will pardon everyone convicted of a nonviolent drug offense. And then 2 days later, he changed. And by the way, that number of people is approximately 45,000. Then the next day, he changes his mind and he says, no, I misspoke. When George Stephanopoulos said to him, you mean even in cases of cocaine and opium? Oh, no, in those cases, you don't have a right to do with your body as you wish. In those cases, we'll look at early release and early reintegration of some people. Well, if you look at his numbers, and he says he only wants to legalize marijuana and for all other drugs, legalize personal possession amounts. But even with marijuana, he wouldn't allow dealing of marijuana unless you have a dealer as a license as a dealer. So he might not, there's 11,000 people in federal prison for marijuana dealing, and there's approximately 92 for marijuana possession not involving dealing. Meaning Yang might just want to free 92 people, or on the high end, 11,000, out of 2.2 million people in jail. Are you following? Good! Meaning, even if we change federal policy, we are going to also need to change state policies. Meaning, we are going to need governors, first of all, who want to pardon people who haven't hurt someone, and even if they have hurt or killed someone, giving them much less time than they were given if some panel determines they're safe. But in the end, I would make the decision. But if some panel decides that they're likely safe, but otherwise we also want to have a look at what they've done and also the likelihood of the chances that they got the wrong person. I mean, you have to understand, the number one evidence used in conviction for murder, rape, like Trump, I don't know how many women he's raped, at least 2 or 3, according to their testimony, including a 13-year-old who he tied up and raped. Jeffrey Epstein was so angry that he raped her when she was a virgin that he then raped her ass, according to testimony, according to her lawsuit. Anyway, Trump is disgusting. Yes, he raped a 13-year-old, but she stopped the lawsuit, I guess, when he started stalking her, having his men stalk her. And in her lawsuit, he said, "I'll do to you what I did to Tiffany," which I think her name was Tiffany. That was a friend of hers who she had met at the parties but hadn't seen in a while. Yeah, you better start looking to what happened to Tiffany, all you good reporters out there. Anyway, let's get back to the business. I am still running. I intend to make it, with your help, to this next debate and give them all hell. Oh, yeah, let's go through the people quick. Bernie believes in legalizing weed, no other drugs. And he says he's against the war on drugs. Warren says she'll do whatever the states does, I think. Certainly nothing besides marijuana. Buttigieg and Yang say, we'll allow for personal possession amounts, but we'll lock you up if you are caught possessing anything larger than personal possession. They say up to a 10-day supply. Really? Well, what if I am not going to be near my supply for 10 days, so I decide I have to buy a 20-day supply? And also, how do I have the right to do to my own body if I'm not allowed to buy something from someone else? I mean, that's not saying I have the right to do to my body as I wish. That's saying you have the right to do to your body as we wish. To which I say, fuck you. You don't have a right to tell me what to do with my own body. Now, I am also, so the problem is now, if we want to make it, if we get to this debate and we win, as I'm sure we will, and the whole country agrees with me on legalizing drugs and not on these other pieces of shit. Oh, let me just get to the issue. Besides the issue that, it doesn't really allow us to do to our own bodies what we wish, it also keeps in place the whole police state. The whole police state. Meaning that the police get to tap your phones, follow you, and try to determine if you're taking your prescription drugs and selling it. By the way, we'll do away with the concept of prescription also. I deeply believe that this is an unconstitutional law. Because it's only been in place around 50 years, because we have the right to do to our own bodies as we wish. Meaning, no government, no neighbors of mine who call themselves a government have the right to sit down and say to me, look, we think that what you're doing is, we don't like what you want to do to your own body. I mean, fuck you. I have a right to eat what I want, food or drugs, to medicate my body as I wish, as I feel necessary, not if some doctor agrees with me, not if I have PTSD from fighting in some war, or I'm on my deathbed so I decide I want to try hallucinogens, and I can go to a special doctor who's well-versed in the attributes of, DMT versus ayahuasca versus LSD versus psilocybin versus, kratom versus, whatever the new stuff from Africa, ibogaine. My point is, fuck you. If I want to have a little, garden in my backyard where I grow, organic hallucinatory plants and then make a tea once a month and have a big party in my backyard and invite all my best friends. No, you don't have the right to arrest me and all my best friends because we're having a holy experience. And you don't get to arrest me if we call it religion or we don't call it religion. You don't get to favor religion over non-religion too. All of you people into this saying that only native people have the right to indulge in the hallucinogens that are natively grown to their native. Fuck you. I don't have to join some tribe to try out the hallucinogens of the region where I live. I don't have to join some local tribe. Are you nuts? That's favoring religion over non-religion. That's favoring native religion over non-native religion. Non-native religion taking a bypass through Christ. I'm looking at you, Santo Daime Church. My point is, we have the rights to do to our own bodies, and nobody has a right to tell us we can't. Now, how does this all tie into mass surveillance, you ask? What is the connection, Fred, between legalizing drugs and what's the problem with saying that we can't possess amounts to deal? Don't we need the federal government to lay down the law, to tell people what is good for themselves or not? First of all, the federal government has legalized sugar. Sugar. You know what the most deadly and addictive drug known to humankind is? Sugar. Sugar is 8 times more addictive than cocaine. In terms of numbers of deaths, sorry, I haven't crunched all the numbers lately. I will crunch them right now as we speak, actually. Let me find my, I'm talking into the cell phone. That doesn't matter. The main number to know is, you know how many, sugar is now believed by most doctors to be responsible for most deaths, meaning, cancer, sugar. Alzheimer's, sugar. Diabetes, obesity, sugar. Hypertension, heart disease, sugar. So, how many people die in the world every year? 36. No, sugar is the cause of 2/3 of all deaths, I believe. So 36 million people a year worldwide. You know how many people worldwide all illegal drugs kill a year? Oh, you must be, how many million? You want to know? 1/5 of 1 million. Meaning all illegal drugs, we're talking, okay, besides, that doesn't include tobacco and alcohol. I have to look up those numbers. They're a little more. But all illegal drugs combined kill about 200,000 people worldwide. Sugar kills 36 million worldwide. If you extrapolate out those numbers to the U.S., 5% of the world's population, it must mean that we have about 2 million deaths due to sugar a year versus, how many people, die from cocaine a year? No guess. Around 5,500. You know how many it was the year before? Around 3,500. You know why there's a jump? It's because cocaine is illegal, that people don't know what they're buying, right? And what do you think the dealers have started to do? What's the cheapest drug out there? Fentanyl. Yes, it's supposed to be it's a stronger opiate, and people when they're buying cocaine aren't expecting an opiate, they're expecting an amphetamine, right? A synthetic amphetamine. But what do they get? An opiate. By the way, and they die because, anyway, my point is, you know how many, however, do you know what percentage of people in federal prison? Okay, so there's around 90,000 people in federal prison, around 50% of them in for drug use. You know what percentage of those in for drug possession or use are in for 50% of those, of the 50% in for drug possession or sales, about 50% are in for cocaine possession or sales, around half for powder, around half for crack. As I said, do you know how many people until 2 years ago cocaine was killing? Around 3,500. You know how many people we have in our federal prisons for those 3,500 deaths? Around 45,000. And then in our state prisons, state and local prisons, around 200, around a million. That would around 500,000. That would mean around 500,000. And now you add in other drugs, other crimes. I mean, first of all, I'm sure that not just the number of people in our jails and prisons are in for drugs, but then there's the fact that drug either use or its illegality causes people to need to rob to get their drugs. And then, so in other words, it's also the cause of robbery, muggings, injuries. It's the main cause, I'm sure. I'm sure of it. So what do you do? If you have something out there that people are getting addicted to and robbing for, what do you do? If you want to stop the robbery, what do you do? Free drugs. Free drugs. I mean, that's part of healthcare. When you look at it, the number of people in jail are disproportionately poorer and disproportionately of darker skin or of black and brown ethnicities. There's no such thing as race, ethnicities. Now, darker skin colors. Now, in other words, and what was that group? What's the same correlation of that group? That's the same group that hasn't had health care. So in other words, they're self-medicating. But it's not just that. America's like war on drugs. No, it's a war on Americans. It's the main cause. We have around 30, 40 people being shot in the streets every day. We have around 30, 40 people dying on our streets of accidental overdoses, or they think they're taking one drug, they're taking another. We have, of course, hundreds of thousands and coming across the border, around 1 million in the last year, running for their lives, refugees of the violence caused by our war on drugs. They are running for their lives. If you guys haven't watched the video, I have. Go on YouTube and watch Walter Cronkite talking about the war on drugs. He says, well, if there's one thing you can say about our war on drugs, it does make good television. And what do they show? A helicopter gunship flying over a jungle in Central America with U.S. troops at the helm going. When you do that for day after day, year after year, shooting at innocent peasants, just growing farms, growing plants, the only way they can grow something to earn a living, when you go and do that, and then you say 20 years later, 30 years later, I started fighting against this 33 years ago when I was a senior in high school. I was a Washington intern, hearing the head of the Department of Defense giving a big speech, bragging about strafing the jungles. I didn't yell out during his speech. I should have, but of course they would have arrested me. But I spoke to him face to face afterwards, and I gave him hell. Like, what are you doing? Killing innocent people. We have a right to do to our own bodies. They have a right to grow whatever plant they want, especially if we're paying them for it. Leave us alone and leave them alone. Look. We have a right to do to our own bodies as we wish. They are using this excuse of drugs to do mass surveillance. It's called the Hemisphere Project. And if you ever do a Google search on it, Hemisphere, you'll find a big New York Times article about it. They've enlisted the help of, I think it was AT&T or Verizon, and they're tapping into all the big phone lines, and they say they're just data mining, but I'm sure they're also looking at the text of what we say also, and they're probably listening in also. If they're not sure about the transcript, then they go to the voice. Of course they are. They're using the war on drugs as their main excuse to spy on us. There's also the war on terror. They're using that as an excuse. But don't kid yourself. They have not ever busted one person, stopped one terrorist act by tapping all of us. And they can't point to one case because there isn't one case. And by the way, all of these other cases where you hear they thwarted a terrorist plan while it was being plotted. No, they don't. Usually they get people to go and say, just like they go and they have a drug dealer cop pretending to be a teenager, pretending to be friends with the local, at the high school with a half-retarded, half-autistic kid, till he wants the cop so much to be his friend that he goes out and buys an eighth of marijuana and sells it to the cop who says he wants marijuana so bad, then they lock up the autistic kid. Same thing they do with these, quote, terrorists. They find the people who are nuts and they say, oh, well, don't you hate those Jews or those Christians or those blacks or those Muslims? And then they say, yes, yes. And I say, don't you want to kill them? Yes. Well, would you kill them if I gave you a gun? Yes. Here's a gun. Oh, well, thank you. Boom, busted. That's not how you do it. That's not how you do it. You have to, if you really want to do it, you wait till somebody is doing a crime. Yes, you have to actually wait till someone's doing a crime. And you can't follow them and tap them according to our Constitution unless, you have significant basis in knowledge that they are breaking a crime. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's, preponderance of the evidence, meaning over 50% when the evidence is weighted. Yes, I'm a lawyer. I'm the only candidate running who knows we have a human and constitutional rights to do to our bodies as we wish. Now, to tell you more about myself, as I said, I've been fighting the last 3 years to throw Trump out because he lost this election. I am running now, starting a third party. Simultaneously, I'll run as a Democrat. However, it looks like we've missed the deadline to sign up in a few states. So we'll get on this debate stage. Hopefully, we'll do a clean sweep in all the states that are left and hopefully win at the convention. However, we will simultaneously start a, quote, third party. I'm very against this party system, just like George Washington was. He warned us against excessive partisanship. Obviously, Trump is evil. Obviously, the Democrats are far less evil. However, they have filled the ranks with judges who don't believe we have human rights to democracy, to one person, one vote, who don't believe we have human rights to do to our bodies as we wish, and who don't believe that if we're being tried for doing something to our own bodies, that we have the right to a fair trial, with the jury being told that they have the right to vote not guilty if they don't think we should go to jail for doing something to our own bodies. And yes, I believe we have the right to commit suicide, and we even have the right to beg our best friend to help us do that suicide. How dare you? We have the right to live and we have the right to die. And yes, we women have the rights to do to their own bodies as they wish. And no, a fetus does not gain any human rights until it's born. Roe v. Wade was decided wrongfully. I've always believed that from the minute I heard that the state has some interest in the life of the unborn fetus once it has a degree of viability. Look, a woman has a right to do to her own body as she wishes, and the fetus does not gain any human or constitutional rights to citizenship until it is born. Now, I myself was a preemie. I was born 2 months early. I believe I was born largely due to the stress of my mother worrying that my father would be shipped off to Vietnam, which almost happened, even though he was the only eye surgeon on the biggest army base in the country and was, saving many, many troops' eyesight every day. Some people had it out for him and wanted to kill him and decided they wanted to send him to the jungle to die because they didn't like him. I don't know why, because he was Jewish or any other reason. By the way, happy Hanukkah. I'm wishing you many miracles. Now, so, many miracles. And we're going to start with freeing the slaves this year. Yes, we have 2.2 million Americans in jail. There's around 11 million arrests, and there's around 75 million, 80 million with criminal records, and we want to free most of those in jail, so say about 2 million, and pardon most of those with convictions, meaning about 70 million. Now, obviously, some people will want to commute the sentences instead of pardoning. That way they'll still have a record, and if we feel the public, we'll still be scared. That's a better way to do it. But, it's really about giving people second chances in life and saying, why do we punish cruelty and torture and violence with cruelty, torture, violence, and slavery? What's up with that? How do we show that something is wrong by doing it again? That's insane. I mean, what we should be doing is have free college for everyone, free housing for the homeless, and affordable housing for everyone else, free college for everyone, yes, and then a wealth tax on, multimillionaires and billionaires. So if Pete Buttigieg says, oh, well, what do we want? Rich people getting free college? Hey, if you're rich enough to pay the wealth tax, God bless you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, because we need the money. Now, my wealth tax, I've been fighting for a wealth tax for 18 years. I've been running for president. I've been fighting to legalize drugs for about 33 years. Since I was a senior in high school, I figured out that the war on drugs was an evil, unconstitutional war on people. War on American citizens and foreign citizens. And we have human rights to do to our own bodies as we wish. As we wish. But for 18 years, I've been fighting for a wealth tax. I've been fighting to end these overseas wars and to bring all our troops home. I am the only candidate who opposed going into both the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, because I knew that going after bin Laden was the important thing to do, not going after the Taliban, but going after Al-Qaeda. And there's a difference. That's why we're cutting a peace deal right now with the Taliban and not with Al-Qaeda. Because there's a difference. I said this all along. There's a difference. And the average person in Afghanistan has nothing against America. But if you go in there and you shoot them up and you start shooting them up, then they're going to start hating you, and all the Muslims in the surrounding countries and around the world are going to start hating us. And then when Bush used that word, crusade, within a day of 9/11, he again said the crusades are on again. Oh, the U.S. media didn't even notice. Yeah, well, the media in Europe noticed, and they said, you can't go using these words because this is going to just stir up the shit. And what did it do? It stirred up the shit. No, these anti-terror... Look, we need to fight. Yes, we need to stop these terrorists. But the way to do it is not by blocking our borders. It's not. You go after the people who do the murdering. But now we have to realize by doing all these wars... We've created millions of people running for their lives, millions of refugees. Of course we have to help them out. We've ruined their lives. We've killed millions of people in Afghanistan and Iraq. I am the only candidate. How do you know you can trust me? I'm the only candidate who fought against going to those wars. Now, however, I admit when it came down to the first Gulf War, I was convinced by all the news on CNN about how Saddam Hussein has gone into Kuwait, and we have to stand up for the integrity of international borders. It wasn't about international borders. It was about oil. You see the U.S. going to, and the rest of the world getting together to invade Georgia, to throw out the Russians. You see us getting together. That was under Bush, W. Bush, 10 years ago. Did you see? No. Why didn't you see that? Because it didn't happen. You see the rest of the world joining together to send joint forces of the UN to Ukraine to fight the Russians? No? Oh, you missed that. Why? Because it wasn't about integrity of borders. It was about oil. What should have been our tip-off? That they weren't fighting to put in a democracy. They were fighting to put in one dictator over another. The previous dictator over the new dictator. That's ridiculous. All right, so anyway, I've been fighting for a wealth tax. My wealth, and to bring all the troops home. Yes, I want to close about, 98% of the bases. We could still have troops on boats and airplanes going around the world. But yes, I believe it is necessary to keep some troops in, South Korea to stop attack from North Korea. And we have to have troops in Eastern Europe to prevent attack by Putin, who's out to try to steal our election again. And by the way, I am very angry at Biden for certifying this election. If you watch the video on C-SPAN and on YouTube, there were people screaming, "One person, one vote," while they're getting arrested and dragged out. We have the right to one person, one vote. Biden should have never certified that election. It violated our rights to one person, one vote. So the goal here, yes, I'm running as a Democrat, but if we lose that race, and as I said, simultaneously we will start a third party, and if we lose that race, we will immediately shift to the third party and run as a third party. And now if we're losing towards the very end, towards the very end, we will then, I'll say 2 weeks before the paper ballot before the paper ballot voting starts, we would, if we're losing, we'll throw it to the Democrat and beg people to vote for the Democrat, because we don't want to end up slaves to Putin. But we do want democracy, and the way to do this is we win as a third party, and then we impeach and remove every judge who voted. Well, every judge, because not one judge has allowed the jury to be informed of their right to jury nullification. Not one judge has stood up for our human rights to democracy, human and constitutional rights to democracy, and not one judge has stood up for our human and constitutional rights to do to our bodies as we wish. So, yes, we have to remove them all. Now, if some judge can make a case that he stood up for what was right, or she stood up for what was right, great. But most of them resigned, 30 years ago when they came up with mandatory minimums. They were like, we don't want to be rubber stamps. Fuck you, we're out of here. Go run your totalitarian Nazi bullshit without us. And they did. They've, as I said, about 75 million, 80 million Americans adults have criminal convictions. That's around 1/3 of all adults. That means that around that number of people can never find a job again, can never get housing again. And you say, oh, well, the unemployment percentage is only around 4%. How is that possible? Because the unemployment numbers don't count the tens of millions. Maybe it's probably close to around 100 million who have stopped looking for work. Granted, many are students, many have retired, and many are, caring for a family member, as I've been caring for my sick mom for many years, helping to save her life, especially while I fight this battle against the federal government. And I've saved her life many times, thank God. But however, most of these people, I don't know what number, but a huge percentage would be looking for work if they thought they could find work. However, they can't because they have criminal records. And you have employers saying they can't find people who don't have criminal records, so they don't even think of employing them. So in other words, the only way that we can get America working again is to expunge these records. Just like I got a criminal record for drinking and driving twice 20 years ago. And I knew that I wasn't intoxicated, but I knew that the breathalyzer said I was. So I pled no contest, and I bit, my second sentence, because I hadn't had the first one expunged, I had to do 3 weeks in jail. And yes, I was, jail is torture. I was tortured. I was tortured during the first arrest to the point that my thumbs are still numb. And now they've just done research on all the DUI breathalyzer machines, and they found that, not one of them, that they were designed by the company to be, to overstate the amount of alcohol in your body by up to 50%. And both of my, numbers were like 1/10 of 1% below the number, and 1/10 of 1%, and on the number, and on the dot. And no, I wasn't accused of swerving because I was totally fine. But my point is, and obviously people can drink too much and not be safe. And there is a simple solution to that, and it's not called jail. It's called requiring breathalyzers to be put in every car. And by the way, I am completely against allowing robots to drive our cars, to put our lives in danger, to steal tens of millions of jobs, and to put our lives in danger by having a robot drive a car. Have you ever heard the expression, putting a key in the ignition is the same as putting your finger on the trigger of a gun? Well, that's how I was taught when I was being taught to drive. Well, would you let a robot walk around the streets with a gun? Would you allow us to have RoboCops? Hell no! Should we allow cars to be driven by robots without humans controlling them every 10th of a second, i.e. a driver? Hell no! All right, I need a break. My point is, we are starting a third party. We are going to have governors and legislatures up and down the line who believe in our rights to democracy, our rights to freedom, our rights to not be locked up and enslaved and tortured if we're not hurting someone else. And even if we do hurt someone else, our rights to start a second life, and our goal as a society to give people a second chance, if possible, if they're not going to cut us up. All right. God forbid. All right. Love you all. Talk soon. It's up to 45 minutes now. I was hoping to do 3 minutes. Now I have to record another one that's much shorter. Love you all very much. I was just protesting the other day to close the camps, stop Trump from torturing hundreds of thousands of innocent immigrants, mostly huge percentage of them children. It's disgusting, torturing children, ripping them from their parents' hands, not even keeping track where to send them. That is like a Nazi. That is like a Nazi. You say, how can you call Trump a Nazi? He likes Jews. Yeah, just because his daughter married a Jew doesn't mean he's happy. Really means he still wants to fuck his daughter. We all know that. All right. Love you all. We'll stop this horror. Close the camps. Free the slaves. Free the 2 million. Fred 2020. Fuck Trump. Oh, and fuck Biden. He certified this election, and his son did crack cocaine. You don't hear Biden explaining to us why his son deserved not to be in jail, but 45,000 Americans deserve to be in federal prison, and hundreds of thousands more in our state and city jails and state jails. How dare he? How dare they all? How dare they all? Making millions, locking us up. Fuck you, we're going free. Fred 2020, free the people. Woo!